Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to episode 63 of the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I've discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. It's always an adventure anytime we take a trip into the wildlands, and nothing beats having some company while we do it, so I'm glad you decided to join up with us today. Dee Dee, our canine expedition leader, is... Where the hell did he go? I could have swore he was here a minute ago, but anyway. Dee Dee should be around at some point to greet you, give you the obligatory sniffing of the leg and all that, but until he gets back here, go ahead and settle in by the campfire, my friends. We've been to a lot of places on our expeditions, but today we're going somewhere new. We are going deep into the lush jungle of Selinoyarsk, which is just south of the former Soviet Union. Just what are we doing here, you might be wondering? Over the course of 62 previous expeditions into the gaming wildlands, we've built up quite a reputation for ourselves, and we've been asked to undertake a dangerous mission into enemy territory. A Russian rocket scientist wants to defect to the United States, and we need to locate and extract them. Should be a fairly straightforward endeavor, as we'll have a support team working with us over the radio, and we'll have a simple extraction plan. Really, we should be home in time for dinner. But if anything goes wrong, we'll be eating dinner, breakfast, and all the rest of our meals in the jungle. We'll need to rely on our training to remain undetected as well, as an encounter with the enemy could spell doom for us and our entire mission. What do you think, my friends? Are you up for it? Well, good, because as soon as Dee Dee gets his little butt back here, we are heading off. Just, goddamn, where the hell did he go? Holy shit, there you are, boy. God, didn't even see you there. By the way, what are you wearing? I see. You are using camouflage. Very sneaky, my boy. Let's make sure everyone at the camp is equipped with plenty of camouflage and face paint so we can blend in with our surroundings. I had Dexter, Dee Dee's brother from another dog mother, scout ahead and give us a lay of the land. We'll need camo for the lush jungle, as well as camo for some urban environments, sandy terrain, swamplands, and even pitch black environments. How's everyone going to carry all this camouflage and be able to change them on the fly without someone walking in on us while we do it? Well, you see, that's going to be part of the fun, my friends. Anything can happen in a pause menu, so we'll be just fine. On today's episode, we're checking out a video game that took the stealth-based action-adventure genre in a new direction. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we would see stealth-based games like Tenchu, Stealth Assassins, and Thief. The Hitman series also debuted in the year 2000, and in 2002, we would see the first Splinter Cell game released. Each of these games, and even the ones that came after, had their unique approaches to stealth-based gameplay, and allowed the player to hide in the shadows and sneak around the game world while taking out enemies or accomplishing specific tasks or missions. And while it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it was that the stealth genre of games was truly born, I argue the release of Metal Gear in 1987 was one of the main starting points. Taking place mainly inside a brick-and-mortar military compound, players controlled an operative codenamed Solid Snake, and his mission was to infiltrate Outer Heaven, a fortified military zone, in an effort to destroy Metal Gear, a bipedal walking battle tank capable of launching nuclear missiles anywhere in the world, and virtually at any target in the world. Snake would ultimately do battle with Big Boss, the leader of Outer Heaven, who was also Snake's commanding officer. Talk about a double cross. Snake would emerge victorious, but the series would go on from there and blossom into multiple games that would span decades. And in 2004, after we experienced Metal Gear Solid on the original PlayStation and Metal Gear Solid 2 on the PlayStation 2, series creators took us back to the very beginning of the series by tossing us into a stealth environment we really hadn't experienced up to that point. And that environment was the jungle. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater expanded on the stealth formula in some interesting ways by adding a camouflage system that added to your ability to stay hidden, a stamina gauge that you needed to keep filled by eating local flora and fauna, an injury system, and a close quarters hand-to-hand combat system. Snake Eater would go on to be one of the most highly regarded games in the entire Metal Gear series, and in the stealth genre as a whole. And while stealth-based games aren't really my absolute favorite, they can be incredible when they are done right. But for me, it's the story Snake Eater tells to the player that always stuck with me. At the time of this recording, Konami is set to re-release MGS3 as Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. And while the release date hasn't been officially announced, I have a feeling we are getting close. So I decided to replay this game so you and I could dive into it a bit together in preparation. Plus, I've been itching to share my thoughts on the story and this game's amazing ending. Now, just to set the stage ahead of time, my plan today is to talk about the game's basic story setup and gameplay. We'll work through the game's opening segment called the Virtuous Mission together and reminisce on Snake Eater's gameplay as we go. Afterward, I do want to talk about some parts of the game that will ruin certain plot points, and I do want to end the episode talking about the game's ending. You'll be able to listen for a good while, as the Virtuous Mission section is the very start of the game, but as soon as we get into those plot spoilers, I will let you all know well in advance and give you plenty of time to dip out if you don't want anything spoiled for you if you haven't had a chance to play this game yet. And please, do not let me spoil this game's story for you if you've never played Snake Eater before. Games in the Metal Gear series can have some really complicated stories and character moments, but I always felt like Snake Eater kept it simple and it was very easy to follow in my opinion. So again, don't let me spoil things unless you want them to be spoiled. I am very excited to talk about this game today, and I hope I can do it some justice. Stealth-based games aren't always for everyone, but of all the games in the genre, I argue MGS3 Snake Eater is one of the good ones. Well, mostly. I don't love everything about this game, but I am getting ahead of myself. Now, if you're new to the show, I like to kick things off first by chatting it up with you all and give everyone a peek behind the scenes here in the Retro Wildlands before we get into the episode proper. Depending on what's on my mind, I like to share what's going on with the show, what's happening in my personal life, talk about what games I might be playing, or whatever else I feel like spitting into this here microphone. I'll also use this time to read and respond to any comments we received about Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater as a way to set the stage for the main part of the episode and give members of the community a moment to share their own thoughts and memories. Now, if none of that interests you and you're just here for the Snake Eater experience, no worries, you can skip ahead about 20 minutes, and you should get into the game talk. That's purely an estimate based on the comments that we already received and what I know is coming up, but I will put timestamps in the show notes, so if you want to know exactly where you need to go and you don't want to stick around, you can go exactly to that spot by clicking it on your podcast app. But I will say, you should definitely consider sticking around. It's going to be a relaxing time as we chit-chat, talk some video games, and your fellow Wildlanders will get a chance to sound off their thoughts to the rest of us, and I can't think of a better way to get our expedition moving. So, without further ado, let's get into our opening segment that I like to call Campfire Catchup. With 2024 coming to a close, I've been thinking back on the year, and I have to say, I'm happy to be heading into a new year. 2024 wasn't the worst year ever for me personally or anything, but it felt like one of those years where I just cruised through it half tuned in, half tuned out. My day job brought tons of stress this year, and there were some days I just couldn't bring myself to be as productive with my time as I wanted, whether it was with this show or things I needed to do around the house. People often look at the new year as a time to sort of reset, and I am really looking forward to that. Now, like I said, 2024 wasn't all bad. When I sit back and think about it all, plenty of awesome things happened. We had our yearly family vacation that took us to Orlando, Florida, where we were fortunate enough to take the kids to Disney World and spend several days checking out the Animal Kingdom and Universal Studios. I was able to go to 2 gaming conventions this year, the Cleveland Gaming Classic and Korgs down in Columbus, Ohio. My family and I also partook in a few escape rooms this year, which I have to say, I am not the best person when it comes to figuring out puzzles and riddles, but escape rooms are fun with the right people. I was able to visit some of my close friends from high school a few times this year, which was a long time coming too. I also officiated the wedding of one of my good friends a little over a month ago, and it is an experience that I will never forget. And as of this recording, I was fortunate enough to make time to read about a dozen new books this year, and complete about 30 new-to-me video games. Oh, and I also watched 25 new-to-me movies this year, too. Yes, that is correct. I am one of those people that likes keeping track of these kinds of things. So I guess when I look back at everything that happened this year, 2024 wasn't too bad. But god damn, I am ready to get this year over with and start fresh. I want to find a way to play more games, read more books, catch up on some movies that I've been meaning to watch, and do more with the retro Wildlands as a whole. Maybe one thing I should do soon is rank all of my top things in 2024. Best game I played, maybe even the best movie I saw, or the best book I read. Is that something you'd be interested in? You can get a hold of me on our social media pages and let me know if that's something that would interest you. So, speaking of 2025, I have a couple resolutions, which I am hoping I stick with. I figure if I say them out loud to you all, that should help my chances, so we'll see. Regarding the retro Wildlands as a whole, I've been dinking around with ways to get back to some semblance of consistency around here. One thing I've done a handful of times now that I want to do more of is live streaming. While I don't have the best computer and equipment setup in the world, I've been able to upgrade my tech and internet speeds just enough to where I can stream pretty consistently and reliably. I've been having a blast playing the original Resident Evil games, and I'm learning a lot about streaming in general. It's been a bit of a learning curve because it's not just playing the game. I enjoy talking to people, and I often find it hard to play a game and hold a conversation at the same time, so it's been fun to navigate around both. And while I'm fortunate enough to have had at least 2 or 3 people join me each live stream, there are times where I would just be talking to myself, and that can be tough sometimes. Still, I have had a blast each time I stream, but it has been a while. I'd love to stream at least once a week like I was when I was playing through Sea of Stars with my pal Lindsay, but I also need to make sure that I won't be taking away from time here at home. So that's something I'll be talking to my wife about. Maybe I'll do it every other week, we'll see. So all that said, stay tuned for that. Beyond that, and finding other ways to grow the retro Wildlands as a whole, another resolution I have is that I want to complete at least 3 of the original 6 Final Fantasies. I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a physical copy of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters that included 1 through 6, but I haven't taken the plunge with any of them yet. Well, no, I take that back. A couple of years ago, I started Final Fantasy VI, got about halfway through, and then I just stopped. And I've played the first game about halfway through as well on my PlayStation Portable, but didn't commit to finishing. After playing Final Fantasy IX for the first time this year, I really want to complete all of the mainline Final Fantasy games, so this coming year will officially start that journey. Another goal that I have for 2025 is that I want to complete 50 video games or more this coming year. These games include games that I plan to complete for the show, too. While I think I've come to terms with the idea that I'm never going to play all the games that I own, I really want to commit to finishing what I have. I'm fortunate that I have a rather large physical games collection, but I never wanted to be one of those collectors that collects and doesn't play. I want to experience as much as I can this coming year and fill as many gaps in my retro resume as I can as well. And to accomplish that, I am going to need to be strategic with my time. So let's math it out for funsies. This is not an endorsement or anything, but I do want to mention that I use the website How Long to Beat to track my games, so let's take a look here. If I spend 2 hours a day gaming, let's say, times 7 days a week times 52 weeks in a year, that's 728 hours. I still need to upload the rest of my backlog, but of what I have up there on the website, I'm looking at an average of 14 hours a game to beat. So divide that into 728 hours, and I have the potential to complete 52 games this year at a pace of 1 a week. Nice. So, I guess we'll just see how it goes. Now, if you're interested in keeping up with my 2025 gaming journey, be sure to follow the Retro Wildlands on your favorite social media platform. You can check out our link tree at linktr.ee/RetroWildlands, which will spew out all of our social platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Blue Sky is another platform that we're on, and it's been blowing up recently, so join us over there as well. Once I'm back to streaming, I'll be streaming over on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, so be sure to follow us over there on those platforms or whichever ones you prefer. And, speaking of social media, I'm going to try and be more active with posts this coming year as well, and at least commit to the idea of posting at least something once a day, if not more. I always worry about drowning people in stuff from our social media pages, but I do recognize that there are times where I'll go days and sometimes even as far out as a week before I post anything, and I do want to close that gap. Download numbers for the podcast itself continue to grow, so in 2025, I think it is time to really push social media and get our name out there, and I'd love it if you came along for the ride with me. Alright, I think that's about it as far as my goals for 2025 and what's going on with the podcast as a whole. But really quick, before we move on, an update on what games that I'm currently playing. I am mostly focusing my gaming time on Mario and Luigi Brothership, the RPG adventure on the Nintendo Switch. I mentioned that I was playing this game last episode, and so far I'm still having a pretty good time with this one. It's still very much a 7 out of 10 game for me, but it continues to surprise me and keeps things fresh as the story goes on and as more abilities and gameplay mechanics are unlocked. The story is pretty generic for my liking, but the battles are fun, the worlds are cool to explore, and the progression is mostly satisfying. I'm about 40 hours in, and I am not getting the impression that I am close to the end yet, though I'm making it a point to do as many side quests as I can when they pop up, so I know that's adding to my time. Even if the rewards for these side quests are completely hit or completely miss. Still, I'm committed to finishing this one now, so anytime I have a chance to game on the Switch, that is what I'm playing. Well, no, not exclusively, now that I think about it. My sister-in-law recently picked up Moving Out on the Switch, and once my wife and I tried it together, we scooped that one up as well on one of Nintendo's latest eShop sales. If you've never heard of this one before, it is a mostly co-op game where you and up to 3 other pals play the part of movers, and you have to move all the objects in a home or a building to the moving truck as fast and efficiently as possible. It is one hell of a good time, but be warned. Make sure you have a solid relationship with whomever you're playing with because you will need to work together to be successful. While my wife and I usually work well together when we play co-op games, last night was especially frustrating because we were both tired and couldn't beat one of the harder levels to save our lives. Still, it has been fun, and I love playing co-op games with Justine, so I highly recommend giving this one a shot if you're looking for some wacky co-op goodness. Other than that, I also got sucked into playing Skyrim a week or so ago, but I have successfully put it down for the time being. I own a PlayStation Portal, and in case you missed the news, you're able to cloud stream games with the Portal if you have the highest tier of PlayStation Plus. The best part about that is you don't need to connect to your PlayStation 5 to do it. I tested this out by firing up Skyrim, and my god, I was very impressed with how it all handled. I've got decent internet here at home, so the connection was always solid, the graphics in the game looked crisp, and I had a ton of fun looting people's houses of all their valuables while I sat on my toilet. Back in the day, I almost 100%ed this game on the Xbox 360, and as soon as a trophy popped up while I was playing Skyrim on my Portal, I almost let the idea of going for a platinum trophy consume me. I was able to walk away, thankfully, but all of that to say, I might be revisiting Skyrim in the near future. Maybe I'll do a podcast episode on it. Maybe. Alright, I think that's about all I have for this catch-up session, my friends. It is time to get to the reason that you are all here today. It's time to talk about Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. We had a few members of the Retro Wildlands community chime in with their Snake Eater thoughts and memories. First up, we have Curtis, who chimed in over on our Facebook page. He said, "One thing I really appreciated about this game was the little touches, like having to literally catch, cook, and eat snakes. Little touches like that added more depth to the game, even if it could get a little annoying, and it really helped add more immersion for me." I 100% agree with that, my friend. I don't really remember a game around this time that emphasized a jungle setting quite like this. Most stealth-based games were centered around urban environments. Gray walls, cramped indoor facilities. This was the first time we really got a setting like this, and adding the stamina meter, which made you have to hunt for food to keep yourself healthy, was a great touch. It's like you weren't just fighting the enemy, you were fighting and mastering the environment. I do agree things had the tendency to get annoying though. You had to go into, 5 different menus just to eat something? It was all a little bit tedious after a while, but still, for the time and even in some ways now, this idea absolutely fits in this game and I cannot imagine the experience without it. We also got one more comment about Snake Eater from Eric, who also chimed in over on our Facebook page with this. "Absolutely love everything about this game. From when you're knee-deep in blood and bodies, to when you're sneaking through the woods and come up upon someone that's an enemy and when you hold them hostage. The storyline was/is amazing. Just brings back a lot of memories, and Sons of Liberty too. In that game, I love Mr. X's sword that you get at the end. Can't wait to hear this episode." There is something very satisfying sneaking around in the jungle in this game. The inclusion of stalking, where you can walk extra slow and not make any sound, is awesome, especially when you get someone in arm's reach and you're able to take them down, interrogate them for information, or like you mentioned, Eric, hold them up. I didn't hold up very many people though. I was more into the CQC aspect of the game, and I loved tossing people around like there were sacks of potatoes. And I agree, I loved getting a hold of the sword at the end of Sons of Liberty too. That game went way off the rails with regards to its story, so after trying to digest that particular narrative, it was very nice to just slice and dice my way to the end credits. Eric and Curtis, thank you both for taking the time to drop your thoughts on MGS3 Snake Eater. I really appreciate it. If you listening want to drop your thoughts on a game that I'll be covering on the show, be sure to follow us on your favorite social media platform. You can find all of our socials when you go to our link tree at linktr.ee/retrowildlands. I'll put a call out when I start writing up the script, so if you want your comment featured on the show, that is how you do it. Or you can join the Superpod Lounge, a Discord server that's part of the Superpod network that I frequent. I'll put a call out in our dedicated Retro Wildlands channel as well. I'll be sure to put a link to the Discord server if you're interested in joining up in the show notes. Hope to see you all there or on our socials, my friends. Originally released on November 17th, 2004 on the Sony PlayStation 2, and later made available on the PS3, Xbox 360, PlayStation Vita via the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, and later made available on the Switch, PS4, PS5, PC, and Xbox Series everything, thanks to the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1. Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, continued the series by expanding on the stealth gameplay the series was known for in some unique ways, all while serving as a prequel to the entire Metal Gear universe. Set in the year 1964, 31 years before the events of the original Metal Gear, we join covert CIA agent and Fox operative Naked Snake as he attempts to rescue a Russian scientist who is looking to defect to the United States. What starts as a simple snatch and extract mission behind enemy lines soon turns into a complicated game of espionage and betrayal. Beyond his rescue mission, Snake will be tasked with destroying an experimental weapon before it sees combat, but his greatest mission will be to assassinate one of the greatest soldiers who ever lived. A soldier who happens to be Snake's former mentor. Tensions across the globe are still high, and if Snake doesn't succeed in his mission, the world will face a conflict like never seen before. Can Snake succeed in his mission, which will ultimately require him to kill the one person he holds dear in this world? Or will he fail and doom us all? The answer to that question, my friends, is going to be completely up to us. So let's gear up, Wildlanders. Don your tiger stripe camouflage fatigues, smear on a little green face paint, and tie on your bandanas. This won't be an easy mission, and our country is asking a lot of us. But as we sneak our way through the jungle, are we going to have the strength needed to accomplish our mission? Can we really kill her, our mentor? One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny.
I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one else. Crime, it's the way I fly to you. I'm still in a dream, Snake Eater.
As I continue to discover new video games and play some of the older ones I missed out on, I often hear some games referred to as, quote-unquote, one of the greatest of all time, or a specific game that someone must play before they die. A lot of times the criteria for such games are the idea that the games included have some sort of historical significance on video games as a whole, or they introduce some sort of gameplay element that was the first of its kind or is completely unique. And while those are fine enough reasons for a game to earn the must experience stamp of approval, I find that my own criteria for this sort of thing often comes down to the individual and what that game means to them. But there's sort of a catch with this. A game or other piece of media that really resonates with you and means something to you may not have the same impact on someone else. Does that mean you shouldn't share your passions? Of course not. But I say all that to say, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is a game that really means something special to me, and I'm very excited to talk to you all about it today. Though, now that I've replayed the game as a 40-year-old adult with not nearly as much free time as I used to have, I fully recognize that this game may not suit everyone. Some things I used to love about this game do continue to impress me. Other things about this game no longer seem as interesting or as innovative as they used to be. And at the end of the day, this is a Metal Gear Solid game where you're spending more time watching cutscenes or listening to radio conversations between characters than you are playing the actual game. I don't have the official numbers, but I read somewhere online that there's about 10 hours of cutscenes and radio conversations if you decide to watch and listen to them all, and about 3, maybe 4 hours of actual gameplay to be had. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but they seem right to me. While I love the cutscenes and listening to these characters talk about everything and anything thanks to the superb voice acting, not everyone may feel the same way. Skipping them is optional, of course, but I argue doing so will rob you of some much needed and very interesting story beats. So when someone tells me that Snake Eater or games that have a ton of dialogue like this aren't for them, I can't say I really blame that person. A game is meant to be played, right? But, my friends, even after re-experiencing this game and seeing how rough this game can be nowadays, I still hold this game up as one of my personal favorites. And one of the reasons for that is the story this game tells and how attached I became to the characters, specifically our protagonist, Naked Snake. I won't really get into the details about Naked Snake and how he ties into the Metal Gear universe until we talk spoilers on the off chance you've never played this game before, but this character holds special meaning for me. When this game was first advertised, I don't think we really knew who this character was. Game director Hideo Kojima worked with artist Yoji Shinkawa and had him design Naked Snake much like Solid Snake, the protagonist from earlier entries in the series, except Naked Snake would be young, naive, and still learning. Even though I got Naked Snake's true identity spoiled before I played the game for the first time, it actually made the game more interesting from a narrative standpoint knowing who it was that you were playing as, and getting to watch him grow into what he would become one day as the story played out. And that's what really stuck with me over the years. I also love that the overarching story takes place over top of real-world events, and even has its own ways of explaining how certain events in history actually played out. Well, fictionally, of course. While Snake Eater may not be as snappy and as cutting edge as it used to be, the game's many quirks and its story are what make this a game that I will always recommend. Now, really quick before we start dissecting this game and experiencing it firsthand, a reminder about spoilers in case you skipped past the intro of the show today. As we talk about Snake Eater, I'm going to walk us through the game's opening mission called the Virtuous Mission. It's more or less the game's tutorial mission and sets up the game proper. I will be talking about some of the story beats and gameplay mechanics during this opening mission, but there's nothing here that I would personally consider a spoiler. Afterwards, I do want to touch on the game's finer features, like some of the boss battles and some of the more interesting quirks this game has to offer, and I want to highlight the game's ending so I can speak to what that experience meant for me the first time and still means for me today. Once we get to the spoiler section, I will give you clear warning, so if you don't want any of the major plot points spoiled for you if you haven't played the game before, or you're waiting for the remake to drop, you can dip out if you want and come back after you've experienced the story for yourself. Does that all sound good? Awesome. Now, let's start diving into this game and see exactly what it is that we're working with. So, what is this game? Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was originally released on the PlayStation 2 back in 2004. This game serves as the prequel to the entire Metal Gear series taking place in 1964. This is a third-person action-adventure stealth game with a huge emphasis on stealth. Players take control of a CIA operative codenamed Naked Snake, who represents the Fox Unit, a unit that specializes in solo sneaking missions. One of the things that makes this game so unique is that previous Metal Gear games took place in urban environments like military bases. Snake Eater will see us primarily navigating jungle environments, a first for the series. We'll have to make our way through the mostly jungle terrain, avoiding detection by enemy patrols as we work to accomplish our mission. When the game begins, our mission is a simple one. We'll be sent into an area just south of the Soviet Union called Selinoyarsk, and we'll be tasked with locating and securing a Russian rocket scientist named Nikolai Sokolov. He's looking to defect to the United States and needs help getting there. What makes this mission so dangerous is that it all takes place in 1964 during America's Cold War with Russia, so tensions are very high. We need to make sure we sneak in and out undetected. If we're caught or killed, the United States will deny everything, meaning we're truly on our own to get this job done. What makes Sokolov so important that the United States would risk poking Russia, especially when Cold War tensions were at an all-time high? Well, that's not for us to know right now. We're just soldiers, and all that matters is the mission, right? That, in and of itself, will be a question that we'll find ourselves asking soon enough. It's about time we pop the game in and begin our mission, but before we do, it's worth noting that Snake Eater has seen several iterations over the years. It was originally released on the PlayStation 2, but about a year later it was re-released as Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. It's an expanded version of the game with one notable difference. In the original game, the camera view was mostly top-down like previous entries into the series, but in Subsistence, players were treated with a full 3D camera, meaning the player could rotate the camera around Snake, effectively seeing much more around them. This was the version that I got my hands on when I played this game originally, and man, I cannot imagine playing this game without the 3D camera option. In the more recent versions of the game, you can toggle back and forth between the two camera schemes, but come on, nothing beats a 3D camera scheme in a stealth game, right? Snake Eater was also released in the Metal Gear Solid The Essential Collection, which came with the original game on the original PlayStation, MGS2, and 3 on the PlayStation 2. The Metal Gear Solid 3 HD Collection brought the game to the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and the PlayStation Vita. They even made this game for the Nintendo 3DS, calling it Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater 3D. Gameplay was updated to feel more like Metal Gear Solid 4 and Peace Walker from the PSP. Graphics were improved, and you had the ability to crouch walk. Most recently, and how I replayed the game for this episode, Konami released the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1, which made the first 3 games accessible on current generation consoles, the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series Everything, PC, and even the Switch. There's a lot of ways to play this game, so don't worry about finding a method to undertake your mission to save Sokolov. Speaking of, it is well past time that we get this ball rolling. We're going to fire this up on the PlayStation 5 via the Master Collection today and play this game on a modern console because, I don't know, why the hell not? Figured we'd do something different and give the PlayStation 5 a little love. So let's wake up the system from rest mode and get this ball rolling. While I do love that little beep, I think the best software update that they came out with for the PS5 was the one allowing you to shut that startup beep off. I never really minded it, and thankfully I have a spouse that doesn't roll her eyes whenever she hears that sound. Well, at least not that I've ever noticed, but anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. On screen, the PS5 awakens from its slumber and gives us the obligatory warning if you happen to have photosensitive epilepsy. Next, because I turned my console on with the button on the console like a weirdo, we hit the PlayStation button in the middle of our controller to start signing in. We select our profile, and then we quickly enter our 4-digit passcode to access said profile. The majestic sounds of the home screen. MGS3 is already selected since that's the last thing I played, so just press the X button on your controller and enter the game. After we see the Konami logo, we're met with the Master Collection's title screen for Snake Eater. For those that have played the game before, you will immediately recognize the man we see on screen. Holding a crisp military salute and dressed in his military best is Naked Snake. This right here is one of my favorite depictions of this character, if I'm being honest. White flower petals seem to be floating around Snake, and it creates a sort of air of mystery. When we press a button on the controller, we're taken to a submenu. While I haven't explored it fully, the Master Collection sports some pretty cool extras that series veterans and fans are sure to love. I'm not going to get into the weeds and go through all of these extras here, so let's go ahead and keep moving along. Let's select Game Selection, the menu choice at the top. From here, we can choose to play the North American version of the game, the European version, or even the Japanese version. I never got around to really diving into the differences between each version, and if I had the time, I'd love to play through them all one day so I could spot the differences, but for today, let's stick with the North American version. Next is our language selection. While I can speak some French, bonjour, je m'appelle François, omelette du fromage, and I can speak a little bit of Spanish, donde está la biblioteca, let's go ahead and stick with English. Lastly, we can either select Start Game, or we can check out the online manual. No need for the manual since I'll be showing you the ropes around here, so let's go ahead and select Start Game. From here, we're now in the game proper. More specifically, we're playing the MGS3 HD version that came out on the PlayStation 3. The Konami and Kojima production logos come on screen, but then we'll see the logo for Blue Point Games, the developer who helped port the original PS2 version over. I'd like to think that they did a pretty good job overall. After their logo, an opening movie starts to play, but go ahead and push your start button. This opening movie is going to play later, and I personally think it's way cooler when we put it in between some of the gameplay that we're going to experience. Now, from here, we're taken to the title screen. On screen, the game's title appears, but what always caught my eye first was the background. The background itself is covered in an eye-catching camouflage-style background, but within it, we'll see Snake using CQC, Close Quarters Combat on an enemy soldier. I always found CQC fascinating, how in-game and with CQC-style techniques in real life, you can disarm and incapacitate your enemy. While the CQC you'll use in-game isn't this advanced really, it's still really cool to see, and in a way we won't understand for a while, CQC has a very important role in the narrative. Now before we press start and keep moving, here's a fun little Easter egg for you. You can manipulate the title screen by pressing several buttons on your controller. R1 speeds up the CQC animation, R2 slows it down, pressing the right thumbstick changes the color scheme. There's so much more, so if you think about it, press some random buttons when you're at the title screen and see what happens. Stuff like this really isn't all that impressive nowadays, but I love discovering little Easter eggs like this when I was younger. And the nice thing is, MGS3 is full of them. Anyway, when you get your fill messing around with the title screen, go ahead and press start to keep on moving. On the next screen, we're going to have some options. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get into detail with all of them, so let's hit the high points. New game and load game, I would hope, are self-explanatory. Briefing files allows you to watch a couple cutscenes that set up the story behind the Virtuous mission, the game's opening level of sorts, as well as Operation Snake Eater, the meat of the game. Demo Theater lets you come back and watch any of the in-game cutscenes if you're looking to relive your favorite moments. We also have the options menu, which will, allow you to tweak some gameplay options, and a special menu that has some tutorials that you can read through, as well as a photo album of any photos you take while in-game after you acquire the camera item after beating the game once. Lots to mess around with here, but let's stay on mission and select New Game. Now, from here, we'll need to make a selection from 4 choices, and the ramifications of each choice aren't quite clear. You'll need to select between, I'm playing the MGS series for the first time, I like MGS1, I like MGS2, or I like MGS3. Depending on what you select, your gameplay experience will differ slightly. I'll let you either experiment on your own or look up what does what, but I will say, selecting I like MGS3 gives you more things such as extra camouflage to use in-game, as well as access to some special features outside the game. But for now, let's select I'm playing the MGS series for the first time just to keep things basic. Okay, next up, difficulty. There is a bevy of options here, starting from very easy, going all the way up to extreme difficulty. From my experience, as you go up in difficulty, enemies are more plentiful, they will spot you easier, you can't carry as much ammunition around, and boss fights get harder. Of course, to get better endgame rankings, you'll want to pump that difficulty level up. Oh, and there's also the European extreme setting if you're looking for a unique challenge. It's available by default in the Master Collection, but I think back in the PlayStation 2 era, you had to beat the game first before you could select it. I don't know, I can't remember. But I do know that in this game mode, it is an instant game over if you're spotted or raise an alarm. I haven't tried it yet, but I've been told it's a wonderful way to change up the gameplay experience. For our purposes today, though, let's select normal and keep everything standard. Once we do, it's game time. As the game opens, we're met with some text on screen to set the stage. Don't worry about reading it yourself, though. Series legend David Hayter, who voices Solid Snake in the first 2 games, narrates for us here.
After the end of World War II, the world was split into 2, East and West. This marked the beginning of the era called the Cold War.
The words fade and we see Konami Presents on screen and music starts to swell up. Alright, here we go. On screen we're shown a military aircraft flying through the clouds. An American flag can be seen on the tail, and for those of you with the proper know-how, or the ability to use Google, you'll know this particular airship is the MC-130E Combat Talon, an aircraft that didn't actually see service until 1966. We're taken inside the aircraft and shown the pilots and several members of the flight crew talking about our current positioning.
Flying over Pakistan, altitude 30,000 feet.
Approaching Soviet airspace.
20 minutes to drop off.
Commencing internal depressurization. Equipment check. Arm main parachute.
All right. You ready to go?
Drop zone still showing a high pressure mass. Cav okay.
Good. We've got high visibility.
Inside the plane's cargo area, we see a man in full flight gear making preparations for what appears to be a parachute jump. And our jumper, who's sitting off to the side enjoying a cigar, is our protagonist, Naked Snake. He seems to be in another world, and when he's asked to put out his cigar, he slowly takes another draw. That is, until he gets a ribbing from the man who seems to be running the show.
Does this pantywaist know what he's doing?
Approaching release point.
10 minutes to drop off.
Hey, are you deaf?
He said put out the cigar and put on your mask.
Snake slowly but finally complies, flicking the cigar away. In slow motion, we get a glimpse of the cigar wrapper. In my personal life, I actually do enjoy the occasional cigar myself. The wrapper says Habano, which from what I read roughly translates to from Havana. I think the cigar here in game is just a basic Cuban cigar that doesn't really resemble a real-life brand that I could find, but I always found this intriguing. Cuban cigars were banned in the United States starting in 1962, and seeing as this game took place in '64, makes me wonder where Snake got the Cuban from. Maybe that's why he wanted to savor each draw. Anyway, there's some useless trivia for you. After Snake puts on his mask, things start to ratchet up. It's clear Snake is about to jump out of the plane, and the man in the cargo bay with Snake continues the countdown.
Depressurization complete.
Checking oxygen supply.
6 minutes to drop off. Opening rear hatch.
Sunrise.
We see a shot of the gunship as the sun creeps over the horizon. It's a beautiful sight indeed.
External temperature minus 46 degrees Celsius. 2 minutes to drop off. Stand up.
Snake gets to his feet.
You'll be falling at 130 miles per hour. Try not to get frostbite from the wind chill.
1 minute to drop off. Move to the rear.
Activate bailout bottle.
This is one for the history books. The world's first Halo jump.
Halo meaning high altitude, low opening. Snake moves to the rear of the plane, his foot crushing the cigar he had discarded earlier.
Prepare for drop-off. Countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Spread your wings
And fly. God be with you.
Snake slowly allows himself to fall forward and off the back of the plane. After a series of somersaults and flips, the music fades and the screen goes black, revealing the name of the game's director, Hideo Kojima. Man, I don't know about you all, but I absolutely love the opening to this game. Mwah, so good. The Metal Gear series is well known for its unique stealth-based gameplay and memorable characters, but equally so, this series is known for its cutscenes, where we get to sit back and watch the story unfold like we're watching a movie. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I feel like this sort of thing was revolutionary, and when I think back to when I played this particular game for the first time, I had much more time to really sit back and enjoy it all. Today though, even though I still stand by this opening being one of the best, I think your mileage for the overall experience may vary. After we see Hideo Kojima's name on screen, we're taken to another scene which acts as a flashback and explains to us our mission. Then we're back with Snake, who makes landfall in enemy territory. I actually clocked the opening cutscene at about 25 minutes end to end before we actually take control of Snake. It's kind of a long time. So once you enjoy the 25-minute long opening, which I will say is pretty good and expertly voice acted by the likes of David Hayter as Snake, Jim Piddock as Major Zero, and the other soldiers in the scene, we'll find ourselves in Selinoyarsk. Lush jungle surrounds us on all sides, and we can see for miles off the cliff that we're standing on. Snake removes his non-essential gear and takes cover behind a tree. Then he takes a knee, turns on his radio, and prepares to contact his support team. Radio conversations are how a large part of the story is going to unfold. There will be instances, like right now, where the conversations are started automatically, and other times where conversations are optional. There are a ton of radio conversations in this game, easily culminating into several hours worth of audio if you listen to everything the game has to offer. This opening scene that we're experiencing now more or less helps you get your bearings. It's here that Snake is officially given his code name.
Do you copy? You're already in enemy territory, and somebody might be listening in. From here on out, we'll be using code names to refer to each other. Your code name for this mission will be Naked Snake. I'll be referring to you as Snake from now on. You're not to mention your real name.
Snake?
What, you don't like snakes?
What do you mean?
You've eaten one before, haven't you?
In survival training.
I'm glad to hear that.
The man speaking here is Major Zero, the commander of the Fox unit. He goes by Major Tom for this mission, and while that seems strange now, if you pay attention to a radio conversation later in the game, he'll actually explain why he went by Tom instead of Zero for this mission. But I am going to continue to call him Major Zero because that just sounds cooler. Anyway, Snake asks Zero how he'll go about feeding himself in the jungle and mentions that Snake was issued a tranquilizer gun and knife to hunt for food. Hunting and eating isn't really going to be important in the Virtuous mission for how short it is, but when the game really opens up, having a fresh supply of food on hand is going to be very important. This is one of the game's newest features, and it's pretty interesting all things considered. Below Snake's life gauge is a stamina gauge. Over time, the stamina bar will decrease. This happens quicker if you spend a lot of time running, rolling, hanging from edges, carrying too much weight outside your backpack, or whatever else exerts energy. Keeping your stamina up helps you heal from injuries faster, and your aim when in combat will be pretty accurate. As your stamina decreases and Snake becomes more tired, you don't heal as fast, and performance with weapons starts to go down, and that can really hamper you, especially in the late game. I can't remember what happens if you fully run out of stamina, but I think Snake will literally pass out, fall over, and fall asleep for a little bit, and recover a little stamina before getting back on his feet. You can imagine how bad this can be, so keeping food on you at all times to eat is a must. Shooting animals like snakes, birds, or rats will cause them to turn into items that you can pick up and use later. If you hit an animal with a tranquilizer dart, they'll turn into a cage icon, and you can capture the animal alive. While you can still eat the animal, more advanced players have found ways to use live animals for various things, as well as tools to aid in their infiltration. But I'll leave that sort of thing for you to discover. Major Zero also mentions several medical supplies that we have in our backpack.
Yeah, about the backpack. I lost it in a tree on the way down.
I see. Well, you'd better go back and get it then. You know where it is?
No problem. I can see it from here. It's stuck on a branch.
Zero goes on to explain to us how we get our backpack, but I vote we skip that conversation and get right to the gameplay. He can help us later. Alright, now that we're in control, let's take a quick look around the screen. HUD elements are usually pretty sparse as we play, but here are the important things. At the upper left-hand side of the screen, you'll see Snake's life gauge. Mostly self-explanatory, this will decrease as Snake takes damage. Once it's depleted, Snake is toast and it's game over. Another new feature to the game is the injury system. If Snake takes damage in combat or finds a creative way to get himself hurt, he can actually sustain injuries like broken bones, burns, cuts, and so on. If Snake is injured, the overall length of his life gauge will decrease and the missing portion will turn red. Injuries do heal over time, or you can quickly heal them with medical supplies, which happen to be in our backpack that we're about to retrieve. Below the life gauge is the stamina gauge, but we've already touched on that, so we can just skip over it. Next, on the top right-hand side of the screen is what's called your camo index. This is the feature that most people think of when they think of this game. We'll get a more in-depth tutorial later, but it's a pretty simple idea in practice. We have the option to change uniforms and apply face paint on the fly from the pause menu. Different colored and patterned camouflage will help us blend into our environments better, and how well our camouflage is working can be gauged by the percentage in the upper right-hand side of the screen. The higher the percent, the closer an enemy needs to be to us in order to spot us. Moving around, as well as our current stance, i.e. standing, crouching, lying down, will naturally decrease or increase our camo index, so it's always beneficial to take your time in areas that you know that there's an enemy presence. If you head into an area where your current camo isn't the best for stealth anymore, hit that pause menu and switch it out for something else. It's pretty unrealistic if you really stop and think about it, but I always thought that this was a neat system. You have the potential to find different camouflage as you go, allowing you to further blend in with your environments, which is neat. But the one thing that always annoyed me when I replayed this game was how tedious changing out your camo every 20 seconds was. It's not always necessary, but in order to maintain the highest camo index, you'd have to stop, go into the menu, select a new piece of camo, back out, go in to select a new piece of face paint, and then go back through these menus in order to resume gameplay. Changing camo can sometimes take upwards of 30 seconds to a minute each time, and while it's very easy to see which camo is going to benefit you the most, it's all still very time consuming when you add up all that time. Generally, I just found a camo that's somewhere in the middle based on the location that I'm in, and I usually leave it at that. I will say, the camo system in this game is honestly one of my favorite game mechanics of all time. I mean, it's incredible how the game reads your location and movements based on the background of the area that you're standing in. And there's nothing more satisfying in a stealth game than watching an enemy walk right past you because you have the right camouflage on. It really is awesome. But a lot of time goes into these wins, and as an old man who doesn't really have the patience for tedium as much as I used to, I think the enjoyment of this system is going to vary from person to person. Okay, we'll get into how to use items a little bit later, but for now, we need to retrieve our backpack so we can continue with our mission. Originally, when this game was released, the camera would be positioned above us, and we'd have a more traditional top-down view of Snake and his surroundings. To look forward, we'd have to go into first-person view mode by pressing and holding the R1 shoulder button. In every iteration of the game past the original PlayStation 2 launch, a 3D camera was implemented, meaning the camera is now at eye level with Snake, and you can rotate it around using your right thumbstick. The 3D camera makes this game so much more approachable, and I cannot imagine how I would have gotten through this game without it. You can flip between the camera schemes if you want by clicking the right thumbstick, and there are some advantages to doing so keep that in mind. Alright, let's move towards our backpack so we can get this mission underway. The jungle area is covered with tall grass, and it can be pretty hard to figure out where to go, but navigating around isn't too terribly bad. Using the left thumbstick, you can move Snake in all directions. Holding the thumbstick fully in one direction will make Snake run by default, but if you only push the thumbstick just a little bit, Snake will walk. It's slower, but not nearly as noisy. Go ahead now and move forward. Now, you can stick to the left or the right sides of the area here, but I actually recommend going up the right-hand side. You'll know you're on the right track when you slowly start moving uphill in knee-high grass. Why do we want to go this way? Because there's a useful item up there that I want you to pick up. Like previous Metal Gear games, items will hover over the ground and spin, so they're generally easy to spot. Go ahead and grab the item at the very top of the hill here. There you go. You just picked up a life medicine. Just like rations in previous games, this will instantly restore a little bit of your health, so save that puppy for a rainy day. Now, from here, go ahead and jump off the small cliffside here, and you'll be back on the main path. Now, see that large tree where the vines are wrapped around it, almost forming a sort of ladder? You can climb trees like this by walking up to them and pressing the action button, which is usually the triangle button. Snake will start to climb up, and when he gets to the top of the tree, you can walk across any branches that'll support your weight. I never found myself climbing very many trees in this game, but you have to admit, it's an awesome addition to the stealth-based gameplay. I can just imagine hanging out up high, watching a patrol walk underneath you, unaware of where you are. But anyway, at the end of the branch, you can see your backpack hanging. Go ahead and press the triangle button again to hang from the branch and grab it. There you go, super easy. With that accomplished, your reward is another lengthy radio call.
I see you've retrieved your backpack, Snake.
Major Zero goes on to tell you about the backpack feature of the game. In short, you can equip items to your person, which you can then select using the controller's shoulder buttons during gameplay. Anything you aren't wanting to actively have at the ready, you can store in your backpack. You can take almost everything out of your backpack and make it selectable, but the caveat there is the more items that you have at the ready, the more weight that you're lugging around, and that makes your stamina gauge deplete faster. So that said, it's a good idea to only take out of your backpack what you plan to use often. Now, after the Major gets done with that explanation, we get into the beat of the radio call, and we're introduced to our support team.
The first member of the support team will be in charge of monitoring your physical condition, acting as a medic, so to speak, as well as recording your mission data. She's a member of Fox as well, and she's here on the gunship with me.
She.
Hello, Snake. I'm paramedic. Nice to meet you.
Paramedic.
As in a medic who comes in by parachute.
Paramedic is a easygoing gal and acts as the mission's medical advisor. She's great for talking Snake through some of the animals and plants that he'll come across when hunting for food. What I always liked about her was her love of movies. Sometimes when saving your game, she'll talk to Snake about a movie that was relevant around the time that the game took place, and sometimes use scenes from a movie to impart a lesson or a bit of advice. After Paramedic gets done with her introduction, the Major comes back on the line to introduce you to one more member of Snake's support team.
There's one more person I want to introduce you to, Snake.
Huh?
Speaking of snakes, you remember the boss, don't you? A legendary soldier and your mentor. Actually, it was the boss that got the DCI's authorization in the first place. She's going to be serving as Fox's mission advisor.
The boss is?
She also helped me plan this mission. She and I were at SAS together.
Jack, is that you? How many years has it been?
Boss?
That's right. It's me.
Oh.
Talk to me. Let me hear your voice.
It's been 5 years, 72 days, and 18 hours.
You've lost weight.
You can tell just by the sound of my voice.
Of course I can. I know all about you.
We don't really know this now, but the boss is going to become one of the most important characters with regards to the story. We never really get a glimpse into Snake and the boss's past together, but we know that the boss trained Snake up into the agent that he is today, but the boss has been gone for several years. Snake never took her absence well and decides to call her out on it.
Why'd you disappear on me all of a sudden?
I was on a top-secret mission. You didn't need me anymore.
But there were still so many things I wanted you to teach me.
No, I taught you everything you needed to know about fighting techniques. I taught you all I could. The rest you needed to learn on your own.
From the player's perspective, it's a little hard to really dial in on what sort of a connection Snake and the boss share, but you can feel how passionate Snake is about it all. It's not a romantic one, but the two of them have clearly been through a lot together. The boss does give us one key glimpse into her character, though, when she talks to Snake about what it means to be a soldier.
Listen to me, Jack. Just because soldiers are on the same side right now doesn't mean they always will be. Having personal feelings about your comrades is one of the worst sins you can commit. Politics determine who you face on the battlefield. And politics are a living thing. They change along with the times. Yesterday's good might be tomorrow's evil.
Is that why you abandoned me?
No, it had nothing to do with you. I already told you, Jack. I was on a top-secret mission. A soldier has to follow whatever orders he's given. It's not his place to question why. But you're looking for a reason to fight. You're a natural-born fighter, but you're not quite a soldier. A soldier is a political tool, nothing more. That's doubly true if he's a career soldier. Right and wrong have no place in his mission. He has no enemies and no friends. Only the mission. You follow the orders you're given. That's what being a soldier is.
I do whatever I have to get the job done. I don't think about politics.
That's not the same thing. Sooner or later, your conscience is going to bother you. In the end, you have to choose whether you're going to live as a soldier or just another man with a gun. There's a saying in the Orient, loyalty to the end. Do you know what it means?
Being patriotic.
It means devoting yourself to your country.
I follow the president and the top brass. I'm ready to die for them if necessary.
The president and the top brass won't be there forever. Once their terms are up, others will take their place.
I follow the will of the leader, no matter who's in charge.
People aren't the ones who dictate the missions.
Then who does?
The times.
There's a lot to unpack here, but there's a reason I let this play out as long as I did. With regards to the story, two very important things are established about these characters. Snake comes off very loyal to his country and willing to lie down his life for those in leadership. Snake also shows hints of his proclivity to engage in conflict, even if that's all he's ever really known, being in the military for a majority of his life. The boss, on the other hand, values unwavering loyalty to country, and even though she recognizes that soldiers can be used as nothing but tools, it's more important to remain loyal and discard your personal feelings. The mission is all that matters, and sometimes the mission can change with the times. It's a lot to take in, especially when you've only had 7 seconds of actual gameplay under your belts at this point, but part of what makes this story so amazing to me is what happens with these ideas from each character's perspectives as you play.
As long as we have loyalty to the end, there's no point in believing in anything, even in those we love.
And that's the way a soldier's supposed to think?
The only thing we can believe in with absolute certainty is the mission, Jack.
All right, but do me a favor.
What is it?
Call me Snake.
Snake. Oh, right. Your code name is Snake. It suits you well.
From here, the boss talks to Snake about CQC.
CQC? Close quarters combat, huh? I've been in the Green Berets for the past few years. I'm probably pretty rusty.
Not to worry. I'll be here to help you remember.
I mentioned it before, but I love the idea behind CQC in this game, and just in general. CQC is a new feature to the series in this game and allows you as the player to throw enemies to the ground, grab them, choke them out, and much more. Ever see a movie where the main character wrestles an enemy to the ground or disarms them with what looks like judo or something similar? That's pretty much CQC in a nutshell. Getting used to using CQC can be a little tricky, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be throwing around bad guys like ragdolls. As the conversation continues, Major Zero reminds us, for probably the 8th time up to this point, what our mission is. Rescue Sokolov, who is being held in an abandoned factory to the north of our location. It is imperative that we are not spotted, as this is a stealth mission. From here, the game transitions back to actual gameplay and we see Snake preparing to officially set off. But not before getting one more bit of advice from his mentor.
Snake, try to remember some of the basics of CQC.
Snake gets to his feet. After scanning his surroundings through the iron sights of the gun, Snake decides it's time.
Commencing virtuous mission now.
All right, it's finally time to get some actual gameplay in. Are you ready? Well, if you didn't fall asleep during all that dialogue, I reckon you're ready to go. But before we move on, I recommend putting on some better camo before pressing forward. It'll just take a moment, I promise. Go ahead and open up the menu, also known as the survival viewer. Now select camouflage. In the face menu, throw on some woodland camo face paint. It'll add a bit to your camo index, and it's a good all-around face paint for the jungle. Nice, now back out, and select uniform. Tiger Stripe is a camo that I always found as a good all-rounder for the jungle as well, so let's select that one. Perfect. Thanks to the magic of video games, changing your clothes all happens instantaneously, and there is no danger of an enemy patrol coming up on you while you change. But now that we've been through all those menus, don't you see what I was talking about as far as the tedium goes, the camouflage? Anyway, go ahead and back out of the menu, and let's get to the gameplay. In the next few areas, you're not going to have to worry about enemy soldiers, at least not for a little bit. Definitely get used to the controls because you'll want to know how to move Snake around before navigating around the enemy. You'll also notice that Snake has his tranquilizer gun equipped after that last cutscene, as there's an icon in the lower right-hand side of the screen. Holding the R2 button will open up the item screen, and you can use the directional pad to toggle any weapons you have that aren't in your backpack. Let's take a quick look. We have a combat knife, and we also have a directional microphone. Now that is a fun toy that lets you hear sounds and conversations at much greater distances. We're not going to use either of the knife or the directional mic right now, so let's just leave the tranquilizer gun equipped. Now holding the L2 button opens up the item menu. There's a decent amount of stuff here, as you'll see. Pair of binoculars, a motion detector, an anti-personnel detector, and sonar. In previous Metal Gear games, you have the luxury of an on-screen radar that lets you know where your enemies are, and you can see their field of vision. There's no radar in that sense in Snake Eater, however these items offer some unique ways to know if enemies are in your vicinity. They do run on battery power, so you can't rely on them all the time. There's also a fake death pill in your inventory, something that I rarely used but thought was a neat inclusion. If you're ever surrounded by the enemy, you can take this pill and it quote-unquote kills you, even going so far as displaying the game over screen. You can wake yourself up by using the revival pill in your inventory, and that'll get you back on your feet. This is a great way to fake out your enemies and get out of some jams. Just be careful though, if you play dead for too long, the game will actually end. The last thing in your inventory is a cigar. As a passive cigar smoker myself, I love having this item. It doesn't have very many positive uses though. If you equip it, Snake will actively smoke it, and you will slowly lose health. And if you happen to be in dark areas, the glow of the end of the cigar will potentially give away your position. But it is a great light source if you don't have anything else on hand. I'll let you discover how to best use these items on your own, but for now, no need to equip anything to your item slot, so close the menu and let's keep moving. As we move into the next area, we'll come up on a swamp. There's no enemy soldiers here, but there are about a half a dozen crocodiles hanging out in this area. Or maybe they're alligators? I have no idea how the hell to tell the difference. Anyway, you can make your way around them if you're careful. Just don't get too close to them. They'll snap at you or try to beat you with their tails. You can use the tranquilizer gun to put them to sleep with a single bullet if you wanted to make things easier on yourself. Holding your square button will have Snake point his equipped weapon, and the game usually auto-aims towards your nearest threat. If you want to do more precise shooting though, hold down the R1 shoulder button and the game will enter first-person view mode. You can aim in first person, and this is a great way to increase your accuracy. It's sort of a common thing nowadays, but I always appreciated your ability to target an enemy's different body parts when shooting in first person. Headshots are always the best for quick results, but you could also shoot a weapon out of an enemy's hands by shooting their arm with something more powerful than the tranq gun. You can even slow them down by shooting them in the leg. It's these touches that we take for granted today, but really helped enhance the experience back then. Anyhow, navigate past the gators however you see fit, and let's move to the next area. A cutscene takes over as we move into the next area. Snake spots something up ahead and takes out his binoculars to investigate. The R1 prompt appears at the top right-hand side of the screen, which is something that you'll see every now and then. This lets you go into first person during the cutscene. Through Snake's eyes, we see an enemy patrol up ahead.
Major, I've spotted 2 enemy soldiers.
They're probably KGB troops sent to guard Sokolov.
AK-47s and grenades.
Like clockwork, we're tossed into another radio conversation with Major Zero and the boss. After another reminder about how important it is to stay hidden from sight, the boss goes over how to use camouflage. We've already touched on that already, so after the boss gets done with her tutorial, we can go to work. Okay, here we go. You have a lot of choice with how you tackle enemy patrols. You can either attempt to sneak around them using your camouflage to stay out of sight, or what I usually do is I try to take the enemy out. The enemy can't spot you if they are dead and or incapacitated. You can shoot your enemy at a distance, or you can go in close and use CQC to knock out the enemy. The safest option is shooting the enemy from a distance. In first-person view, you can line up a headshot with your tranquilizer gun, and if you land a hit, the enemy will be down for the count immediately. Let's give that a try right now, as one of the enemy soldiers is directly ahead of us. Oh, that reminds me. Hold the X button, and Snake will lie prone on the ground. This is a great way to increase your camo index and steady your aim. There you go. Now, go ahead and take this guy out. Excellent, nice work. If you happen to hit a guard with a tranquilizer dart somewhere other than their head, they'll eventually pass out still, but the effect won't be instantaneous, so keep that in mind. Okay, let's go ahead and move up. Uh-oh, there's another guard further ahead of us, but he has his back turned to us and he's moving away. Instead of taking him out at a distance, let's practice sneaking up behind him and grabbing him with CQC. Now, enemies in this game won't just see you, they can also hear you if you make too much noise. Running will cause the enemy to hear your footsteps, so you'll want to approach your target slowly. Walking, by lightly tilting the left thumbstick, will reduce the sound of your footsteps, but they can still be heard as you get closer. Instead, as we get close to the enemy, we're going to switch over to a technique called stalking. Stalking, as I like to call it, can be done by using the directional pad. As you hold down the pad in the direction that you want to move, Snake will move agonizingly slow, but his footsteps will be completely silent. Even though Snake is moving horrifically slow, he's just fast enough that he'll catch up to the enemy so long as they're walking. Okay, let's try stalking and get into arm's reach of our enemy. Okay, good. Very good. Be very, very quiet. Almost there. Now, press and hold the circle button and reach out and grab the enemy. Nice. Okay, here's the fun part. With the enemy guard in our grasp, we can do several things. We can choke the guard out and render him unconscious by tapping the circle button repeatedly. If we keep doing that after they've passed out, we'll quietly break the guard's neck. Unconscious guards will eventually wake up, so it's up to you to decide how permanently you want to take out the threat. Choking a guard out does take time, so if you want a quick kill, you have another option at your disposal. If you hold down the circle button firmly, Snake will slit the enemy guard's throat in just a quick motion. Throat slitting is a little louder, but it is quicker, so be careful if there are other guards around. But if you have some time and are relatively safe from other patrols, you could also interrogate the enemy. While holding your enemy, click the left thumbstick and hold it down. Snake will put his knife to the enemy's throat, and they'll sometimes spill some useful information. Let's try that now.
Speak.
The others,
Speak.
if you want to learn more, take a look at the survival viewer map.
You can get locations to hidden items put on your map, information about the terrain, or even information pertaining to the game's story this way. It's always worth interrogating your enemy when you can. But once your interrogation is over, you have to decide what to do from there. Personally, I recommend knocking out enemies instead of flat out killing them where possible. The only reason for this is that kills will negatively impact your final rating at the end of the game, which is very annoying if I'm being honest. The game doesn't actively ask you to go non-lethal, and while you are actively encouraged to stay out of sight and avoid enemy contact, I felt like I couldn't really use all of the lethal weaponry I found because of this. There's also a boss fight that I won't spoil here that gets more difficult depending on how many enemies you've actually killed up to that point in the game, so just for the sake of making that encounter easier, try to go non-lethal if you can. But man, nothing beats popping off patrols at a distance with a silenced assault rifle. Anyway, tap your circle button repeatedly and put this guy to sleep, will ya? Good work. It's like you've done that before. You can walk over to the body and hold down the square button to have Snake grab the body. From here, you can drag the body wherever you want. It's always a good idea to hide fallen enemy soldiers so that enemy patrols don't find them and call in for help. Alright, it's not entirely clear how many other soldiers are around the area, so let's cautiously move towards the north. Uh-oh. Up ahead, there's a soldier that's getting dangerously close to us we didn't see earlier. He stops in his tracks all of a sudden, and a blue exclamation point appears overhead.
I think I saw something.
When the enemy is out patrolling normally, they might not immediately recognize us from a distance and come closer to investigate. In these cases, we'll either need to get out of sight quickly or take the soldier out. Given how close this guy is, I vote we take him down with a tranquilizer gun. If we move too much, our camo index may go down and he may spot us as a result. Go ahead and take aim in first-person view mode and let him have it.
Huh?
Crap, you missed! The sound of the dart hitting a nearby tree makes the soldier think he's under fire and he quickly grabs his radio.
HQ, respond.
This is HQ.
Patrol here. We're under enemy fire. Enemy's position is unknown. Going into alert formation.
Acknowledged. Sending reinforcements. Use extra caution.
On screen, we'll see the word caution with a countdown timer that's counting down from 99.99. When the enemy is in this state, they still aren't aware of Snake's presence and will be extra cautious in this mode. They won't follow their normal patrol patterns, and more soldiers may be called into the area. When you're in this state, don't panic. You haven't been spotted yet, and things will return to normal when the countdown reaches 0. Our best bet is to turn around and make our way to some tall grass and hunker down.
Huh? Who's that?
Damn it, another soldier sees us. Quick, before he...
Who's that?
Once we hear that classic "they spotted you" sound, the game enters alert mode, and now we have a problem. A counter will appear on screen that will stay at 99.99 until we can break the enemy's line of sight and go back into hiding. Or we can get ourselves out of alert mode by taking out all of the enemies. While the enemy has us in their sights, they'll actively try to take Snake out with gunfire, and unless you're paying attention at the start of the mission, we don't really have the means to defend ourselves. Tranquilizer gun's only gonna go so far. CQC is a decent defense, and if we want to head right into the bullet storm, we can run up on enemies and throw them to the ground, knocking them out. But expect to take a few bullets in the process. Another strategy would be to exit the area that you're in. Depending on where you're at in the game, this doesn't always get you out of a jam, as other patrols in other areas may be aware that something is wrong, but it's still a good way to break line of sight with the enemy. Whatever you do, do it fast, or else you're going to be taking a dirt nap while enjoying the series' classic game over screen.
Snake! What happened? Snake! Snake!
There's still a lot I could touch on when it comes to the overall gameplay, and in classic Metal Gear fashion, we have just barely scratched the surface as to what's on offer here. There's many tools at your disposal and ways to work through an area that you're in, and it's really up to you as the player to decide how you want to go about each challenge that you face. Even though the game subtly encourages you to not kill everyone you see, there really is no wrong way to play. The biggest challenge that you're going to face when playing Snake Eater through is going to be the controls. There's a lot that you can do in this game when controlling Snake, and on the surface, that's awesome. You can run, walk, stalk, roll, crouch, crawl, hang, swim, climb. You have close quarters combat where you can punch, kick, throw, grab, choke, interrogate, stab, hold up your enemies, or even use them as a human shield. Oh, and you can even hide in lockers, and did I mention you can knock on a wall to make noise to draw your enemy in? You can also peek around corners, and you can also jump from around a corner with your weapon drawn. There's so much you can do, and while the game encourages you to take your time and explore all of your options, most of this goes out the window in combat situations. It's very easy to lose track of who's around you, and the convoluted controls can make engaging in a firefight with your enemies pretty cumbersome. It's not to say you can't learn the controls over time and get good, but if you're diving in for the very first time, be prepared to have a very clunky experience. I will say, even though I just got done saying combat was very clunky, boss fights are still very unique and very fun to experience. I'll save my thoughts on the boss encounters for the spoiler section coming up, but the Metal Gear formula of having standout boss encounters is very present in this game. Each boss that you face poses a unique challenge when doing battle with them, and that challenge is even harder, but more rewarding if you can find a way to take them out non-lethally. When it comes to the visual presentation Snake Eater has on offer, it's hard not to marvel in how detailed this world is, even today. For a PlayStation 2 era game, the details are on point. I love the jungle setting and how everything around you just feels and looks alive. Snakes slither around on the ground, and as they move through the tall grass, you can see the blades of grass, all done up individually by the way, move back and forth. Every character from Snake himself down to the lowly enemy soldiers are modeled exceptionally well, and everyone's quite detailed. From a sound design standpoint, the noises of the jungle help the environment around you feel very much alive, and while music isn't always present so that the sounds of the jungle or the ambiance of what's happening around you can take precedence, the game's soundtrack does a fantastic job of immersing you in every scene music is present in. And who doesn't love the title track to this game, Snake Eater, sung by Cynthia Harrell? The James Bond-esque song is the perfect icing on the cake. Over the last several years, whenever I think of Metal Gear Solid 3 and the respect and reverence a lot of people seem to have for this game, I often wonder why that is. What is it that makes this game special to those that hold it in such high regard? Not everyone is a fan of stealth-based gameplay, and the Metal Gear series as a whole can be very odd, quirky, and downright convoluted for the uninitiated. Hell, even the initiated can find the lure and all the little nuances hard to wrap your head around completely. I can't count how many times I went to Wikipedia just to remind myself of some of the finer plot details. But for me, now that I've really thought about it all, it has got to be the emotional connection that people have with the story and the character moments and their interactions with each other. The setting for this game is also a huge part too. Taking place in the 1960s and leveraging the Cold War era really helped the developers lean into the espionage aspect of things, and I don't know, it just all feels more authentic. The whole world seemed like it was sneaking around each other at this time, and it all just feels more genuine. I felt genuinely vested in Snake's mission and empathized with his struggles as his mission went on. I know I just spent entirely too much time talking about the opening to this game to explain the gameplay to you and get you immersed in the world, but the real heart of this game is with Snake's development over the course of the game. And let's not forget all the other characters that round out the narrative. Major Zero, Paramedic, Sigint, whom we haven't even talked about yet. Oh, and I didn't even mention Eva, Ocelot, Colonel Volgin, or really get into the boss herself. Though we will do some of that if you decide to stick around for the spoiler section. All in all, MGS3 feels like a complete adventure that's relatively easy for the player to follow, has some great character moments even if they can be a little weird at times in that classic Kojima fashion, and the story wraps up in a way the player will never forget. At least, I know I'll never forget it. When the game comes to an end and all the pieces and threads of the story are sewn together, the aftermath leaves you feeling something, I don't know, genuine, I guess. Even if, like Snake himself, you struggle to figure out what it all means to you. And it's that ending and reflection on the journey that I think people think back to when they decide where this game sits in terms of legacy and staying power. And that ending and what comes after that made Naked Snake one of my favorite gaming characters of all time. Okay, my friends, with that, it is well past time to dive a little deeper into Metal Gear Solid 3. I know we're probably going to go long with this episode, but there's a lot to unpack here, and I would love it if you continue to stick around. So far, we talked about the structure of the game, gameplay nuances, and together we have infiltrated Seleno Yarsk. Even though this episode is poised to be a long one, there's no way we can part ways without talking about some of the epic boss battles, diving into some of my thoughts on some of the characters that we'll meet, and, of course, discussing that amazing ending. So, if you haven't played Snake Eater before and you don't want to have anything spoiled for you, this is where we part ways, my friends. Go forth and either experience the game for yourself now or hang on until the remake drops, whenever the hell that's gonna be. Then, of course, come on back. But if you're sticking around, be warned that full spoilers are on the table from this point forward. I'm going to refill my drink, and when we come back, we'll get into the game a bit deeper, and we'll end the episode by talking about the epic conclusion to Snake's mission. As I wrote the script for this spoiler section, I honestly didn't know where the hell to start. I tried to imagine telling a friend about this game and what it was specifically that I wanted to highlight. There's the characters, the epic boss battles, the memorable radio conversations, that hilarious scene in the waterfall cave with Snake and Eva. I could go on and on. But maybe I'll approach this in order of story and touch on some things as I remember them. I don't know, we'll see what happens. That said, outside of going into the ending in detail when we get there, I'm probably just going to bounce around a bit, so hopefully this part of the show doesn't feel too disjointed. So, let's talk about some of the characters and work in some of the boss fights. When the Virtuous mission ends, a lot happens in a short amount of time. After we make contact with Sokolov, we learn that he's being hunted by a renegade Russian colonel named Volgin, a man that Sokolov refers to as Thunderbolt. As we escape the facility that we found Sokolov in, we're introduced to Major Ocelot, the commander of the Ocelot unit, which is part of Spetsnaz. I remember my eyes going wide when I saw Ocelot for the first time playing this game. Was that the Ocelot from the previous game? Indeed it was, and throughout the game we got to see his origins and how cunning this man was even at such a young age. Ocelot is so deeply woven into the story of the entire series that removing him would cause the series to collapse in on itself. I've heard some Metal Gear diehards proclaim that everything that happens in this series is all thanks to Ocelot in some way. We could probably spend several hours trying to make sense of it all, but I loved seeing Ocelot where it all began, and how his interactions with Snake helped him become who he was over time, specifically with regard to him using his signature weapon, the revolver.
Besides, I don't think you're cut out for an automatic in the first place. You tend to twist your elbow to absorb the recoil. That's more of a revolver technique. But that was some fancy shooting. You're pretty good.
Later, when Ocelot shows back up again and puts Eva at gunpoint, we'll see that Ocelot took Snake's advice and is now holding a shiny new revolver, decked out in some pretty impressive engravings. Snake approaches Ocelot and decides to give Ocelot another lesson.
I see you've got yourself a single-action army.
That's right. There'll be no accidents this time.
You call that an accident? Well, it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been showing off.
What did you say?
It's a nice gun, I'll give you that. But the engraving gives you no tactical advantage whatsoever. Unless you were planning to auction it off as a collector's item. And you're forgetting one more very basic thing. You don't have what it takes to kill me.
We'll see.
The revolver is out of ammo, and Eva uses this opportunity to escape. Completely baffled by what just happened, Snake reveals to Ocelot just how observant he can be.
6 shots. That thing only carries 6 shots. The Makarov carries 8. You have to get a feel for how many you have left. This is a high-class weapon. It's not meant for shooting people.
Damn!
One of the things that made me start to like Snake as a character was how he was able to identify someone with potential and talent. Ocelot was his enemy, but the two of them started to form a sort of respect for one another, which is evident when Eva goes to shoot Ocelot as he flees here.
Don't.
Why?
He's still young.
You'll regret stopping me.
Those words from Eva cut deep. Can you imagine what things would have been like if Ocelot was killed there and then? Which reminds me, there's several points that you do get the opportunity to kill Ocelot if you so choose. But if you do, you'll get a game over by creating a time paradox.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
Not only does this get you a PlayStation trophy for doing this, eagle-eared players will be happy to hear that the guy who did the time paradox voiceover was none other than Colonel Campbell from MGS 1 and 2. Gotta love the little touches. For the majority of the game, Ocelot works with the game's primary antagonist, Colonel Volgin. Of all the villains in the series, I honestly appreciate how straightforward he is. Volgin is just an evil, sadistic man with dreams of power. His main goal was to overthrow Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, and seize power by helping to install Brezhnev as the leader of the Soviets. Many times throughout the game, Volgin displays pleasure from abusing and torturing others, and some of those scenes could potentially make some players uncomfortable, especially since his methods do not discriminate in terms of gender. A woman named Tatiana, who was supposedly Sokolov's lover, took the brunt of Volgin's physical abuse. What makes Volgin stand out more than all of that, though, is his body's ability to generate and manipulate electricity. Coupled with Volgin's insane strength, he was a force to be reckoned with. It's funny now that I think about it. When we meet Volgin at the end of the Virtuous mission for the first time and we see him discharge electricity from his hands, I remember not feeling any sort of emotion towards it. Specifically because I just accept whatever batshit crazy thing happens in the Metal Gear Solid universe and don't question any of it. Most of the time, things like this are explained away using science. Other times, they're left ambiguous. But they never stop being cool. While Volgin does come off as a one-dimensional villain at times, I appreciated his character, and anytime he was on screen, I felt genuine tension, and I felt a little bit of fear knowing that I'd have to take him on at some point. He was cold, calculating, a little unpredictable, and just plain evil. And sometimes you just need a solid, evil villain to drive you forward. But like I alluded to just a second ago, it's the unpredictability of Volgin that makes him such an awesome antagonist. Thanks to Colonel Volgin and his use of a US-made nuclear weapon, his destruction of Sokolov's research facility not only showed off what kind of person he was, but he sparked the events of the entire game because even the US government had no idea who they were dealing with.
We have no further use for Sokolov's research facility. I think it's time I gave this marvelous new toy a try.
Colonel, even if they are our enemies, they're still our countrymen.
But it won't be me that pulled the trigger. It'll be our friend, the American defector.
You're going to nuke your fellow Russians?
Remember the Alamo.
Colonel!
Another interesting character we meet is Eva. During the Operation Snake Eater portion of the game, Snake meets Eva at the location Sokolov was being held during the Virtuous mission. Snake had 4 objectives as part of Operation Snake Eater. Snake needed to rescue Sokolov, locate and destroy the Shagohod, a mobile nuclear ballistic missile platform, take out Colonel Volgin, and then finally eliminate the boss. When Volgin launched the nuke at Sokolov's research facility, the Soviets assumed that the United States was at fault. It was a US-made weapon after all, and the Soviets happened to spot the combat talent in the air during the Virtuous mission. Operation Snake Eater needed to happen in order for the United States to prove its innocence, and the way to do that was for the US to eliminate the woman who defected to the Soviet ranks. That, of course, being the boss herself, Snake's former mentor. If we failed, there was the very real risk of another world war. Snake's first objective is to return to the abandoned factory Sokolov was being held at and meet with a KGB contact named Adam, who will clear the way for Snake to rescue Sokolov.
Adam, your KGB contact, is waiting for you at the abandoned factory up ahead.
The same factory Sokolov was being held in last week.
Yes, meet up with Adam first. He's cleared the way for you to rescue Sokolov.
How will I know this Adam guy when I see him?
You'll know once you reach the factory. The whole area's been polluted by the fallout from that nuclear blast. No one else would dare come close. The password is, "Who are the Patriots?" and "Lali Lule Lo."
Lali Lule Lo. Gotcha.
When Snake sneaks around, he's blinded by a bright light.
Sorry I'm late.
Cut the engine. They'll hear us.
Are you the agent they sent?
Are you Adam? I thought you were supposed to be a man.
Adam couldn't make it.
All right, say the password. Who are the Patriots? Who are the Patriots? Answer me! Trapped.
Get down! There is your answer.
Eva gets off the motorcycle she rode in on and slowly, seductively, walks over to Snake.
The name's Eva.
She steps right in front of him and unzips the top part of her jacket, revealing her chest to Snake. And all Snake can do is look like a kid who's seen his father's nudie magazines for the first time. Hell, with the R1 button, the game will even let you stare at Eva's chest if you want. I will admit, as a kid playing this game, I was all in for this sort of thing. Today, though, I do think this scene and scenes like it are a little cringy. But hey, the Japanese do things their way, and Hideo Kojima is a unique sort of spirit, so who are we to judge? I find it all funny, though, thinking back to when I played the game for the first time. It should have been very obvious that Eva wasn't who she claimed to be. She didn't even know the password, and she loves avoiding direct questions. But I found it very easy to trust Eva as a player, and even Snake himself warmed up to her. It's easy to say that's because of how Eva handled herself, always flashing her boobs around, talking all seductive-like and whatnot. But really the situation we find ourselves in is just crazy and over the top. We were there to kill our former mentor, and the fate of the world literally hangs in the balance. On top of that, we're fighting a man who can literally shoot lightning from his fingertips. It's much easier to just go with the flow and trust this random woman than it is to question everything. At least, that's how I felt, and I wonder if Snake felt the same way. It's also later revealed that Eva was posing as Tatiana, Sokolov's former lover, as a way to infiltrate Volgan's ranks, but I never put that together for some reason when I was a kid. As the game comes to its conclusion, we as the player largely come to trust Eva and maybe even care about her a little bit. Working with her on the back of her motorcycle in one of the most action-packed parts of the game near the end is one of my favorite moments. And when Snake finally lets his guard down and he and Eva share a night of passion together, it makes her delivery of the cold hard truth to Snake even harder to hear and much more impactful. Now, of all the characters in this game, none take the spotlight quite like the boss does. Much of the bosses and Snake's past is shrouded in mystery, but their bond becomes evident as the story goes on. We don't really get a chance to know the boss much in the beginning, and even though the game implies a heavy connection early on, it was hard to feel much of anything when we learned that she defected to the Soviet Union. At the end of the Virtuous mission, the boss confronts Snake in person with this decision. She recaptures Sokolov and then tosses Snake off a rope bridge, seemingly to his death. He survives, of course, taking the boss's bandana with him as he tumbles to the river below. As a player, the impact of this betrayal wasn't much. We really didn't have time to fully understand the connection between these two characters, but it was still sort of a gut punch anyway. You could tell that the boss didn't really want to harm Snake, but her reasons for defecting were lost on us at the time. Snake is still very much attached to the boss, even electing to wear her bandana into battle moving forward. Now, with Volgin recklessly firing the US-made nuke that we learned the boss brought with her as a gift for her new hosts, this sparks the mission in which Snake must kill her in order to prove America's innocence. The boss shows that she's a force to be reckoned with as well, and as Snake meets her several times over the course of the game, she constantly outclasses him in hand-to-hand combat. Snake admits to himself that there is no way that he can beat her with sheer technique alone. It makes us wonder as a player how it is that we're going to take her down. And by the time we get to the end of the game, we know that we're going to have no choice but to find a way, and we're going to have to muster the courage to pull the trigger when the time comes. Each time Snake and the boss meet, the boss seemingly discourages Snake and tells him to go home. All this does for Snake, though, is make him more confused, but at the same time, it was clear that the boss was up to something. She was still guiding Snake, still teaching him even. And the thing that she wanted Snake to really think about was his loyalty and why he was fighting in the first place.
The border is 60 miles south of here. You ought to be able to run that far.
Why'd you defect?
I didn't. I'm loyal to the end, to my purpose. What about you, Jack? What's it going to be? Loyalty to your country or loyalty to me? Your country or your old mentor? The mission or your beliefs? Your duty to your unit or your personal feelings? You don't know the truth yet. But sooner or later you'll have to choose. I don't expect you to forgive me, but you can't defeat me either. You know me too well. Just look at that bandana. If you can't put the past behind you, you won't survive long.
Now, before we go any further regarding the boss and how she ties into the end of it all, I think this is a good time to pivot a little bit and talk about the Cobra unit and the several boss battles that you'll encounter. You're somewhat introduced to the Cobra unit at the end of the Virtuous mission, and it's clear that they are an unnatural bunch. The boss leading this unit were said to be the real heroes of World War II. And if you thought Volgin shooting lightning everywhere was crazy, get a load of these people. Each member of the Cobras is given a code name that's more or less an emotion that they carry into battle. The first one that you're going to fight in battle is called the Pain. At some point, he developed the ability to control insects by secreting a pheromone of some kind. He also receives a large amount of adrenaline when his body experiences pain, hence the name. When we first meet him, he's literally controlling a swarm of hornets because, that's a normal thing in this universe. When you fight him in battle, the Pain is on a platform surrounded by water. You'll mainly want to stay in the water to avoid the bees and projectiles that he throws at you. The Pain will also use hornets as body armor, so you have to kill them off first before you can deal any actual damage to the Pain. The Pain also uses what he likes to call bullet bees, and these fast-moving projectiles can embed themselves in Snake and eat him from the inside. Yes, it's as gross as it sounds. Whenever you get hit by one of these little buggers, you'll have to go into the survival viewer and use your knife to dig them out. It's definitely a little annoying at times. The fight itself is probably my least favorite of all the boss fights, but it's probably the most memorable because, well, Bee Swarm, I guess. The Fury is probably the member of the Cobras that I dislike the most, only because he comes off as the least interesting to me as far as personality goes. The Fury is best known for his flamethrower and fire-based attacks. The story goes that the Fury was set to become the first ever human into outer space, ahead of Yuri Gagarin. But an accident caused the space flight to erupt in flames, and his body was severely burned all over. During the ordeal, all the Fury saw was a world engulfed in flames, and this seemed to trigger some sort of world-hating pyromania in him. When facing him in battle, I was reminded of the fight with Vulcan Raven in the original Metal Gear Solid. You're running down long hallways, and the Fury is trying to cook you with his flamethrower. It could be a tough fight for sure, but I never found this one particularly memorable. I will say I did enjoy trying to sneak up on the Fury as he skulked through some of the hallways. It's satisfying to sneak up behind him and cut him repeatedly with your combat knife. This in turn rips his suit, allowing you to deal significantly more damage to him. I always found it annoying getting hit with a ball of his flames though, because you had to stop what you were doing and constantly treat burn wounds. Still, while not my favorite, this boss fight was pretty decent, if forgettable. Now, the Fear is a memorable character with a memorable boss fight. His whole shtick was the idea that he instilled fear into his enemies. While I don't think he had any actual supernatural powers or abilities, I read that he underwent several surgeries to alter his appearance and how he moved. This included altering his eyes so they looked reptilian and forking his tongue. Surgeons also modified him in such a way that he became double-jointed, allowing him to move very unnaturally. As part of the Fear package when fighting enemies, the Fear used a sort of prototype stealth camouflage that made him mostly invisible to the naked eye. He couldn't use this technology for very long, however, as it apparently was very taxing and drained his stamina very quickly. Another staple of the Fear was his use of poison. The Fear used 2 crossbows and would have bolt tips coated in a poison solution. This all made the Fear a formidable opponent, and when it came time to do battle with him, he was quite unpredictable. Well, mostly. The best part about the battle with the Fear was how many ways you could actually go about it. In battle, the Fear uses his camouflage a lot, so if you happen to have thermal goggles on you, you're able to use those to track him much easier. The Fear is also extremely agile, jumping from tree to tree, so it'll take a patient and steady hand to end up dealing damage to him. But here's some fun things that you can try. Like I mentioned a moment ago, the stealth camouflage will drain the Fear's stamina pretty quickly, to the point where the Fear will actually stop fighting you and go off to hunt an animal in the area so he can regain some of his stamina back. If you happen to have an animal on you that happens to be poisonous, you can toss it out and the Fear will eat it and then become poisoned himself. Or, perhaps my favorite, you can use the fake death pill to pretend to die, which will cause the Fear to walk towards your body in complete surprise. Then, when he turns his back on you, you can spring up using the revival pill and get a bunch of free hits in. It's a fun battle, all things considered, but don't get complacent. The Fear will absolutely take you out if you are not in tune with your own skills and your surroundings. The last member of the Cobra unit you fight is by far the most memorable and unique, and I venture to say this is the most outstanding fight in the entire game. Or it's the most tedious, depending on your viewpoint. The End is the Cobra unit's sniper, and he is exceptionally old. At over 100 years old, The End was called the father of sniping and developed a lot of sniping techniques that were passed down over the years. When you eventually face him in battle, the battlefield is set in 3 different locations, all covered in jungle. The battle is quite literally a sniping battle, a game of cat and mouse. The End is hidden in the jungle somewhere, and you have to take him out before he takes you out. Depending on how you approach this fight, it can take a very, very long time. You have to be stealthy while trying to locate the End. If you're reckless and just run around, the End will quickly fire at you and do so with extreme accuracy. The End usually doesn't move unless you make your presence known, and it's actually possible to sneak up on him if you're good enough. You can use thermal goggles to potentially see him, or you can hear him breathing if you're close enough to him. The End focuses on dealing stamina damage to you, and if he happens to knock you out, he'll drag your ass to a prison cell and force you to do a ton of backtracking as punishment for your failure. But while the fight can be very tedious, what makes the battle memorable for a lot of people are the quirks and oddities. First, if you decide to save your game and quit in the middle of battle, and it takes you more than a day to come back, you'll be met with a cutscene the moment the game loads. Snake will be shown sleeping against a tree, and as soon as he wakes up, he'll be nailed by a tranquilizer dart. The End will chastise you, and it's off to prison for you.
You disappoint me, young Snake. The moment you close your eyes on the battlefield is the moment you never open them again.
Now, if you're having a hard time with this fight, there's another way to achieve victory, though it is a less honorable victory to be sure. If you save your game and wait about a week before you go back to the game, or you cheat a little bit and reset your system's internal clock if you're not that patient, when you reload your save, you'll find out that the End actually died of old age. I mean, come on, how unique and creative is that? Sure, it's a funny gimmick, but the developers and Hideo Kojima did a fantastic job with this one, making what usually is a normal boss fight used to skill check the player into a one-of-a-kind experience. When you load back into the game after a week has passed, a cutscene plays showing Snake sneaking up on the End, only to find out that he's been dead for what seems like several days. I also like how disappointed Snake is with himself if you let this happen. The fight with the End will go down as one of the most memorable to me. It's right up there with the Psycho Mantis fight in MGS1. Whether you love it or you hate it, you cannot deny the creativity that went into designing this battle. Oh, and I almost forgot. If all of this wasn't enough, there's a moment after a cutscene where the End will still be on screen after the cutscene ends and control returns to you. If you're quick enough, you can pull out your sniper rifle, and if you can land a headshot, the End will die on the spot, and you won't even have to deal with this boss fight altogether. There really is no end to the surprises with this guy. Oh, and that also reminds me. There's one scene in this game that's extremely iconic that I wanted to touch on, but I didn't quite know where to put it, so I'm just going to slot it in here. And that scene is the ladder scene. Those of you that have played the game before, I am sure, know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. You might even consider the ladder to be its own boss fight. In case you don't remember or you don't know, Snake will eventually make his way out of the jungle and find himself in a more mountainous region. To get there, you have to climb a ladder. What makes this ladder climb so memorable is that it literally takes 3 or so solid minutes to climb it. All the while, a hushed version of the game's theme song, Snake Eater, plays in the background. I find this point in the game absolutely fascinating. It's one thing to have to climb a ladder for 3 straight minutes, but depending on who you talk to, there's people out there that feel that the ladder is symbolic of something or has some sort of a deeper meaning. As I looked around Reddit, I found people that felt the ladder climb was symbolic of the endless nature of war. Others thought it served as a moment of reflection, forcing Snake and the player to think about what we'd faced so far and steel ourselves for the battles yet to be fought. Some thought the ladder climb was symbolic to Snake rising to face the mission at hand, and ultimately coming to terms with the idea that he is fated to kill his mentor in battle. Or maybe the ladder just existed purely for the sake of being there. I wouldn't put it past Kojima to just put something odd into his game so people could just debate it back and forth with no real answer truly being correct. What do I think the ladder represents? Honestly, it represents 3 minutes I could have been doing something else. Still, it succeeds in being a very iconic moment in the game, and players are free to interpret it however they want. And right there, my friends, is the magic of video games. Well, my friends, we are coming up on the end now. There's still so much that could be said and discussed about this game. But I think if you ask anyone who's played this game to completion what their standout moment would be, I think the mass majority would say it's the game's ending. While the story in Snake Eater is one of the more straightforward ones in the series, you're probably going to go into the ending of the game with some unanswered questions. Still though, as you approach the end of the journey, it seems like things are wrapped up quite nicely. You succeeded in defeating Colonel Volgin, and you destroy the Shagohod, all with Eva's help. Eva ends up getting injured along the way, but Snake and Eva work together and eventually find a WIG, which is a wing-in-ground effect vehicle, basically a plane on water that they can use to escape. However, as Eva heads towards it, Snake stops in his tracks. It's not spoken out loud, but we and Snake know that the boss is near, waiting for us. It's unclear why at this point, but we know we can't avoid the inevitable. Eva heads off to prep the WIG for takeoff, and Snake heads towards the boss. As Snake walks into a field of white flowers, a nuclear explosion shakes the ground as flames and shockwaves fly through the area. Once the chaos subsides, we see the boss standing in front of us, tossing aside a Davy Crockett portable missile launcher. She just destroyed Colonel Volgin's base of operations, and now there was only one thing remaining.
Life's end. Isn't it beautiful? It's almost tragic. When life ends, it gives off a final lingering aroma. Light is but a farewell gift from the darkness to those on their way to die. I've been waiting, Snake, for a long time. Waiting for your birth, your growth, and the finality of today.
Boss, why are you doing this?
Why? To make the world one again.
The boss dumps a lot of information on Snake at this point. We learn that the boss was secretly sent into space by the United States after the Soviets successfully launched Sputnik, the first man-made satellite in history, into orbit. Once the boss made it to space and looked down upon the Earth, it started to change her view of things. Looking down at the Earth, there were no borders. There was no East, no West, no capitalism, no communism. And that really was the world that the boss wanted to see. But the reality was, space, like many other things, was just something for countries to fight and to die over. She also spoke about an entity known as the Philosophers. We learn a little bit about the Philosophers as we move through the game. They were a secret group of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the United States, the Republic of China, and the Soviet Union. At one point, the philosophers pooled their immense wealth into a slush fund of sorts, totaling upwards of $100 billion. This fund would later be known as the Philosopher's Legacy. The legacy was used to develop the needed weapons and technology to end the Second World War. The intent was for the three powers to redistribute the legacy amongst themselves after the war, but the funds were stolen and then divided up and hidden in multiple bank accounts across the globe. There did exist a microfilm, and it had a record of the transactions on it, making it the only way to really access the legacy. Colonel Volgin was in possession of the legacy, which is how he was able to fund the construction of his base and fund the construction of the Shagelhad. The boss goes on to talk about how her father was one of the original philosophers, how her father was killed by that organization, and even how the boss, who had a son, had her son taken by them. But it was all out of loyalty to her country.
I gave up my body and my child for my country. There is nothing left inside me now. Nothing at all. No hatred, not even regret. And yet sometimes at night, I can still feel the pain creeping up inside me, slithering through my body like a snake. I've never talked this much about myself before. Thanks. Thanks for listening to me. I feel content. Snake, commence the operation. I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life, by your own hand. One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. I'll give you 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, Miggs will come and bomb the hell out of this place. If you can beat me in less than 10 minutes, you'll be able to escape in time. Let's make this the greatest 10 minutes of our lives, Jack.
Boss?
You're a soldier. Finish your mission. Prove your loyalty. Face me.
When we regain control of Snake, the boss immediately runs towards us. This final battle is a hard-fought one, especially since you have a 10-minute time limit. The boss, a master of CQC, is quick to use it against you if you get too close. What's worse, if the boss grabs you and you happen to have a weapon equipped in your hands, she'll disassemble that weapon and throw it all over the battlefield. She also has a machine gun that she'll use on you called the Patriot, and she likes to use that anytime she's at medium to long range from you. There's several ways to defeat the boss, including hiding and taking potshots at her, shooting at her from long distances with a sniper rifle, or, if you're good enough, you can counter her CQC and take her down with your own. When the boss goes to grab you, if you press the circle button and continue to hit it with the right timing, Snake will counter the boss and leave her momentarily stunned. You can then throw her to the ground for some stamina damage, and then if you're quick, you can shoot her while she's down too. While there's no time limit displayed on screen, you'll know that you've reached the 5-minute mark when you start to hear the theme song Snake Eater begin to play. Once the song is over, it's game over, so you have to move fast. The battle here with the boss is an incredible battle, something that the whole game has been building to. Now that we've learned a little bit more about the boss, it makes this encounter with her even more meaningful and more impactful. We still don't really know why the boss defected to the Soviet Union in the first place, and maybe we'll never know. But the boss was doing what she felt was right. She was being loyal to the end. When you do finally defeat the boss, Snake stands over her body.
Take this. Keep it safe.
The boss hands Snake a microfilm, the microfilm that contains the philosopher's legacy.
It's our only hope.
She then gives Snake the gun that she was using in the last battle.
A patriot? Why are you giving me this?
Jack. Or should I say, Snake. You're a wonderful man. Kill me. Kill me now. Do it.
Snake gets to his feet and slowly aims the Patriot down towards the boss. The look on Snake's face is pure agony.
There's only room for one boss and one Snake.
And with those words, we're given control. We, as the player, are made to pull the trigger and end the life of the boss. The music fades as the wind blows and the flowers seem to slowly part, giving us a full view of the boss. It's all come to this. It's time to finish our mission. The white flowers all turn a blood red as Snake slowly lowers his gun. The realization of what we just did hits us as the music swells. Snake, with a pained expression on his face, slowly looks to the sky. The boss's horse slowly walks over and lowers its head to the boss's side. And upon realizing that the boss will never ride her again, the horse cries out to the sky as well. Eventually, Snake reunites with Eva, who gets the wig working, and the two of them make their escape. Ocelot catches up with the wig, and he and Snake have one final showdown, but I'm going to skip over that for the sake of time. I will say, despite everything that they face together, Snake and Ocelot part ways with a sort of mutual respect. They will definitely meet each other again at some point down the road. Snake and Eva eventually arrive in Alaska, where the two of them hunker down in a cabin. With the mission over, Snake finally lets his guard drop, and he and Eva share a night of love and passion together. The next morning, we see Snake waking up and finding Eva had left sometime during the night. Snake finds an audio recording left behind by Eva. He spools it up and takes a seat as he listens to Eva's voice through the speakers.
Good morning, Snake. I hope you slept well. First of all,
I have to apologize. I wasn't sent by Khrushchev. I'm not a KGB spy, and I never worked for the NSA.
I'm an agent of the People's Republic of China for the General HQ 2nd Department of the People's Liberation Army. It was all a lie. I tricked you. And I'm sorry.
At this point, the veil is removed completely, and Eva tells us the truth about herself, her true mission, and how it was that we were fooled.
The philosophers still exist in China, too. You see, my mission was to find out where Volgan was hiding the philosopher's legacy and steal it. So I infiltrated his base as a KGB spy. The 2 NSA codebreakers who defected in 1960 were actually both men. The real Adam never showed up at the meeting place, saving me the trouble of having to eliminate him. I sneaked in by pretending I was Eva. And you and Sokolov and Volgan, you all believed me.
Eva goes on to say that, as an agent of China, her mission was to recover the philosopher's legacy. How China couldn't let the Russians and the Americans have the legacy all for themselves. Eva reveals that she was able to recover the microfilm containing the legacy along with the missile launch data from the Shagelhod. During the cutscene, we see that Snake still has the microfilm that the boss gave him. So what did Eva have? Eva, thinking she has the legacy, speaks to how China can catch up with the Americans and Russians as well as begin the development of their own nukes. Eva continues, admitting that she is an agent of the philosophers. But even though she had fooled everyone, the only person she wasn't able to fool was the boss. Eva was groomed at one of the philosophers' charm schools and became an expert at infiltration and manipulation. But the boss just so happened to be an instructor at one of those schools.
The boss was the only one I couldn't fool. She was the only one who knew I was a fake. She told me everything. Why did she open her heart to me like that? At the time, I couldn't understand it. But now, I think I do. Snake. She wanted you to know the truth. She chose me to tell you. That's why she saved my life. I've lied to you so many times, but not this time. My orders from the government were to obtain the legacy and to eliminate everyone who knew the truth about what happened. In other words, I'm supposed to kill you. But I can't do it. Not because we loved each other. And not because you saved my life. But because I made a promise to the boss. And I intend to keep it. I just wanted you to know. And you have to live.
At this point, the audio recording stops, and the device erupts into a pile of smoke, Mission Impossible style. Snake takes the last drag on his cigar before the screen fades to black. The game seems like it's going to end with the bad guys winning this one, and maybe they do after it's all said and done. Snake eventually reconnects with the United States government. He's welcomed back with open arms and high praise from the top brass. There's a ceremony where Snake is awarded several high honors. Some players may have known this going into the game, but one of the rewards bestowed upon Snake is the title of Big Boss. Yes, Naked Snake is Big Boss, the main antagonist of the original Metal Gear. This mission was the beginning of what I'd like to think is the turn for Big Boss. Not the turn into a bad guy per se, but the turn into the man that he'll later become. A broken man who's lost sight of what he was fighting for and why. A man who lost his patriotism. A man that was betrayed by his country. A man who blames himself. A man who now intends to find purpose. It's at this moment where Big Boss became fascinating to me as a character. I felt for him, I empathized with him, and sometimes found myself grieving with him. And in later games in the series, I felt a pull to follow him. All of this doesn't come from the fact that Eva betrayed Snake. It's what Eva tells Snake about the boss. In this final scene of the game, Eva reveals the truth that she learned from the boss herself. As Snake heads to the awards ceremony, we as the player hear Eva's voice, and we get to hear that truth as well.
Snake, listen to me. She didn't betray the United States. No. Far from it. She was a hero who died for her country. She carried out her mission knowing full well what was going to happen. Self-sacrifice. Because that was her duty.
President Lyndon B. Johnson takes the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest honor a member of the United States Army can have bestowed upon them, and fixes it to Snake's chest.
You are above even the boss. I hereby award you the title of Big Boss.
Snake slowly raises his right hand into a salute.
You are a true patriot.
The president extends his hand. Snake doesn't reach for it at first, instead holding his salute. But with a look of what looks like defeat on his face, Snake takes the president's hand and shakes it. The president then turns Snake around and the room erupts in applause. Cameras go off and the flashes are almost blinding. Snake barely acknowledges him though, turning his head away as everyone continues to applaud. Major Zero, Paramedic, and Sigint are in attendance as well, but Snake can't bear to look at them. The director of the CIA approaches Snake and extends his hand for a shake. It was this man who had ulterior motives during Operation Snake Eater. And thanks to Eva, Snake knew the whole truth now. Without shaking the director's hand, and even moving past Major Zero without being able to look him in the eye, Snake leaves the ceremony.
The boss's defection was a ruse set up by the US government. It was all a big drama staged by Washington so they could get their hands on the philosopher's legacy. And the boss was the star of the show. They planned it so that they could get the legacy that Colonel Volgin inherited and destroy the Shagohod at the same time. Only a legendary hero like the boss could have earned Volgin's trust. Finding out where the philosopher's legacy was hidden was to be her greatest mission. Everything was going according to plan. But then something happened that no one could have predicted. Colonel Volgin fired an American-made nuclear warhead at Sokolov's research facility. Khrushchev demanded that the US government provide proof that it wasn't involved. They couldn't just abort the operation to steal the legacy. So the operation itself was greatly expanded and revised. The authorities in Washington knew that in order to prove its innocence, they'd have to get rid of the boss, and that one of their own would have to do the job. The public couldn't be allowed to find out about it. Not ever. This, they concluded, would be the best way to keep the whole thing under wraps. The boss wouldn't be allowed to come back home alive, and she wouldn't be allowed to kill herself. Her life would be ended by her most beloved disciple. That was the way the government wanted it. That was the mission she was given, and she had no choice but to carry it out. Her death in your hands was a duty she had to fulfill.
We see Snake at the Arlington National Cemetery now. He stands in front of a grave and slowly, deliberately places the boss's Patriot machine gun on the headstone, along with a bouquet of white flowers.
She will go down in official history as a war criminal. and no one will ever understand her. That was her final mission. And like a true soldier, she saw it through to the end.
We get a glimpse of the headstone. The engraving reads, "In memory of a patriot who saved the world."
But I think she wanted you, of all people, to know the truth. She wanted to live on in your memory. Not as a soldier, but as a woman. But she was forbidden to tell you herself. That's why she told me. Snake, history will never know what she did. No one will ever learn the truth. Her story, her debriefing, will endure only in your heart. Everything she did for her country. She sacrificed her life and her honor for her native land. She was a real hero. She was a true patriot.
The scene ends with Snake giving the boss one final salute as a single tear falls. And that brings us to the end of our journey, my friends. This has been episode 63 of the Retro Wildlands, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. While I feel the original versions of this game are a bit rough around the edges from a gameplay standpoint, this game will always have one of the best stories, and it sets up one of my favorite gaming characters of all time. I always found the underlying themes of the narrative fascinating and how relevant some of these elements are, even today. Some video games aren't always about going in, killing the bad guy, and saving the world. Sometimes you can only do what you think is right while remaining true to yourself and deciding what the phrase loyalty to the end really means for you. If you liked the show today and you want to show it and myself some support, please consider subscribing to the show on your preferred podcasting platform. The Retro Wildlands is part of the SuperPod Network, home of some awesome gaming podcasts and other gaming content, so you can follow us over there at superpodnetwork.com. Other than this show, you can check out other awesome podcasts such as the SuperPod Saga, Geek Addicts, Super Ghost Radio, Friday Night Gamecast, and many more. There's blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check all of that out at superpodnetwork.com. Now, if you really liked the show today and you have a few minutes to spare, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the Retro Wildlands a good review on your podcast platform if you're able to do so. You can leave a star rating over on Spotify, but you can leave ratings and written reviews on iTunes, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, and Podbean, to name a few. Good reviews will help circulate the show into more feeds, but more than anything, it'll let me know that you're liking what it is that I'm trying to do here, and it would mean the world to me if you had the time and could give us that good review. But, as always, you are under no obligation to do any of this. First and foremost, I want to make sure that I have earned your good review, so if for some reason you didn't like the podcast, but you're still sticking around for some reason, thank you, and I appreciate you being here. And that actually leads into my final point here, my friends. If you don't have time to leave a review, that's completely okay. Just the fact that you're listening to my show right now is much more than I could have ever asked for, so, above all else, thank you for being here. So, what's coming up next? The last time I was at my local retro gaming store, I picked up an NES game that I used to play a ton of when I was over at my grandmother's house when I was little. It was so much fun, especially when I got to play with some of my cousins. It's one of those games where I can close my eyes and hear the music and sound effects, but I can't quite remember whether I was good at this game or not. So, I've been itching to play this game again as an adult and give it another try. And honestly, it seems very appropriate given the cold weather in my area these days. So next time on the Retro Wildlands podcast, I am going to be checking out ice hockey on the original Nintendo. I'm personally not a huge fan of ice hockey as a sport, but the few games that I have seen in real life, I've honestly enjoyed. And I think about this game from time to time, but now that I have it physically back in my gaming collection, it is time to give it a whirl once again. Thank you all again for being here today, my friends. Our expedition into the gaming wildlands is always a hell of a time, but they're even better when you're able to join us. It would be awesome if you decided to throw on your skates and hit the ice with us when our expedition moves into some colder climates next time. So be on the lookout for that episode coming soon. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.